Surgery in the mouth of hell? That's a suicide mission. But when the Leviathan's frost choked the sky and Jormungand's coils crushed the obsidian gates, I saw a god's heart turn to ice. One pulse, one flat line. The world froze. But deep in the dark, a new sun started to beat. Protocol Tartarus. Operating on a dying god in the eye of a tectonic storm? That's how you turn a PhD into a handful of ash. But when Jormungand rose from the mist, a skyscraper of living ice, the world just stopped. Mother Cerberus wasn't a monster then. She was a parent, pushing her broken pup toward my shuttle with a desperate, scorched muzzle. I spent my life studying the anatomy of titans, but nothing prepares you for the sound of an obsidian bridge snapping under 10,000 tons of hatred. The sky turned to steam as fire met frost. I dragged that dying creature into the bay just as the sky fell. Behind me, the gates didn't just close, they sealed our fate in the dark. Looking up at Jormungand is like watching the sky grow scales. His massive body coiled around the mountain, turning day into a frozen midnight. When Mother Cerberus bit into his flank, his blue lymph sprayed like liquid nitrogen, turning ancient stone into brittle glass. A single headbutt from the serpent felt like an earthquake in my chest. I was catching a flying titan pup in one arm, while my laboratory disintegrated in the other. The world turned slick as a liquid nitrogen fog coated the bridge. I punched the ancient runes, forcing the mountain to bleed magma just to give her a foothold. She took it, leaping through the steam to tear into the Leviathan's eye. Then he screamed, a sound that shattered glass and let the parasites in. The parasites didn't just crawl, they swarmed like a white blizzard of living glass. Watching Mother Cerberus crush hundreds under her paws was like hearing 1,000 mirrors shatter at once. But then they found the vents. I watched them pour into the bay, hissing as they chewed through titanium like it was wet paper. I slammed the emergency toggle, surrounding the operating table with a ring of plasma fire. Outside, Jormungand was suffocating her, his coils tightening around her central throat. She fought back with a geyser of molten lava, turning the sky into a blinding fog of steam and ash. In that orange haze, I made the first incision. But when the serpent's tail struck our dome, the ceiling groaned like a dying giant. We were running out of sky. Jormungand didn't just climb out of that pit. He ascended like a king of bones. I saw him crush the gates under his own weight, a mountain of ice and scales looking down at me with cold, godlike indifference. The mother was gone, her light swallowed by the dark below. Then came the sound, a low, grinding vibration that made my screens explode into 1,000 jagged shards. I was blind, working in a shower of sparks and freezing dust, my hands locked onto the extractor. Above me, the serpent's tail cast a shadow that turned the lab into a coffin. I pulled, one final, brutal wrench against the freezing heart. Magma sprayed, blinding me with the heat of a dying sun as the line went flat. He's dead. We're both dead. The bridge didn't just break, it vanished under 10,000 tons of screaming titans. I watched them plunge into the darkness, a tangled knot of fire and frost tearing through the Earth's throat. Every impact against the jagged cliffs sounded like the world was cracking open. Then, silence. A heavy, suffocating quiet left me alone with a dying pup. My hands were elbow deep in glowing magma blood, while the abyss below began to pulse with a lethal neon blue light. Jormungand was down there, charging a final strike that could level the mountain. I was kicking parasites away from the table while ice shrapnel turned my lab into a firing range. I had seconds to find the heart. Seconds before the dark swallowed us all. Jormungand didn't just climb out of that abyss. He ascended like a king of bones. He coiled around the gates, crushing the ancient obsidian into dust with a sound like a world ending. Below, the mother's light was gone, just fading embers in the fog. Then came the hum, a low-frequency vibration that turned stones to sand and shattered my last diagnostic screens into jagged glass. In the dark, I felt it. The pup's heart was a cold, dead stone. As the serpent raised his tail like a guillotine over my lab, I threw every ounce of weight into one final, brutal wrench. The ice roots snapped. Magma sprayed like a dying sun, vaporizing the parasites in a hiss of steam. Then, total silence. One flatline. One god, dead on my table. I tore off my glove, pressing bare skin against the ancient obsidian rune. One hand on the cold stone, the other on the pup's dying heart. Then, the mountain answered. Golden veins of light fractured the dark, surging from my fingertips into the god's marrow. The gates didn't just glow, they hummed like a nuclear reactor coming back to life. Lava started flowing backward, feeding the heart as the pup took its first burning breath. Below us, the abyss caught fire. 6 amber eyes snapped open in the deep. The mother was back. Jormungand shrieked as the floor beneath him turned into a sun, his icy underbelly boiling into toxic steam. I held the glowing creature high as a pillar of white flame erupted from the pit. The siege was over. She didn't just fly, she erupted, a supernova of white flame and liquid gold. The mother cut through Jormungand like a hot blade through a glacier, leaving a cauterized hole in the fabric of the dark. I watched the Leviathan explode from within, his frozen blood boiling into a massive cloud of steam that leveled the sky. Then, the pup joined the fight. He sank his teeth into the serpent's tail, a tiny conduit for the mountain's fury, sending a shockwave of gold fire through the beast. In a flash of blinding light, the King of Ice turned into diamond dust. Then, silence. The air turned warm for the first time in millennia. I stood among the ruins of my life, watching the gods reclaim their throne under a sea of stars. The golden fire faded, leaving the titans in their natural obsidian skin. The battle was over, and for the first time, the gates felt like a home instead of a tomb. I walked out onto the broken bridge, my boots crunching through the remains of my own laboratory. The mother didn't snarl. She leaned in, her stone muzzle warm against my scarred palm, a sound like a volcano purring in the deep. The pup brought me a piece of my shattered helmet, tail wagging with a god's innocent joy. I looked at my hands, burnt and caked in ash, the hands of a man who stitched a myth back together. As the gate sealed shut, I fired my extraction beacon. I saved what was meant to die, and as I flew away, her final roar followed me into the clouds. I left Tartarus behind, a tiny spark lost in a sunset of burning orange. We won the day, but the victory felt brittle, like frozen glass. Down in the dark, where the serpent fell, the ice didn't melt. It waited. Beneath the obsidian dust, 1,000 blue eggs are pulsing in the deep, a silent army of parasites ready to hatch. My log says the gates are sealed, but my eyes saw the truth. A single blue fracture is running through the heart of the ancient rune, leaking the breath of a second winter. We didn't close the door, we just trapped ourselves inside with the shadows. The frost is patient, and I can still hear the stone beginning to crack. Protocol Tartarus.